I had literally written myself out of my family's life. I did. I literally wrote myself out of the equation. And how do I know that? Because when I quit that job and I came back home, they had no idea what to do with me. I had no idea what to do with
Oh
myself.
my God.
I didn't even fit in my own home.
Are you going through life blind? This is Eyes Wide Open with Nick Thompson. On this podcast, we share knowledge and stories that build human connection while elevating stigmatized societal issues such as mental health, holistic wellness, culture, free speech, and more. All to ensure we show up in the world with our eyes wide open. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Eyes Wide Open. I'm your host, Nick Thompson. Today, our guest is going to be Matthew Blades. Matthew is a self-care expert and motivational speaker. But before that, he spent 27 years as a radio host, morning show radio host, as a matter of fact, that would take every opportunity he got to get into a bigger market, advance his career, and continue to be a successful radio host. But at some point, he learned that he was not healed inside from some of his childhood wounds. He was experiencing panic attacks and depression and felt like he wasn't an active participant in his own life. So his story is incredibly compelling. When he started experiencing these symptoms and was unsure what was going on, thought it was physical, he really realized that he wasn't filling his own cup or giving himself the tools and the time to make sure that he could show up as his best self. And now he takes his learning and his experiences and he shares it with others and teaches people the importance of self-care and motivational speaking opportunities. And I love this man's story, and I really appreciate his authenticity as a male. You know, when it's difficult to talk about these things and there's still stigmas around it. Full transparency, Matthew reached out to me and I hadn't even known it, but I had listened to a couple podcasts of his previously without any knowledge. And so I was really excited to have him on and tell his story and share some of mine with him and see the intersections of how we both sort of learned what self-care means and how important it is to us. So without further ado, I hope that you enjoy this episode. We learn a little bit about healing our child wounds and incorporating self-care routines into our everyday life so that we can go through life with our eyes wide open. Our guest today is Matthew Blades. Matthew is a burnout and self-care expert and motivational speaker, but he's also the host of two podcasts, Learn from People Who Live It, and he co-hosts I Needed That with his friend, Chris Powell. He's also the father of two teenage boys and the head coach of the Desert Vista Hockey Club. And I just found out before we started recording, he is also a teacher of a podcasting course at a school in his town. So welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm so good, Nick. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. It's started off a stormy day in Chicago today, and now the sun's out. So
Oh, you're in Chicago. That's where I got married.
Oh, it is. Where'd you get married?
So we got married at the Fourth Presbyterian Church right there on Michigan Avenue.
Oh, yeah.
We had our party after at a wonderful restaurant that's not around anymore called Marche.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Yeah, my wife went to Naperville North in the suburbs. And so she always dreamed of a downtown Chicago wedding, and she got her dream.
I love it. You know what's funny is I always dreamed when I was a kid, so I grew up in the suburbs, and my parents, they were kind of like scared of the city.
Yeah.
And so when I would come down here, it would be such a glamorous adventure with school or with friends or something. And I just remember telling myself, after like being in the loop on a work day for a field trip and seeing how busy it is and everybody going to work, I was like, that's how I'll know I'll made it, if I live in Chicago and I work downtown. And I just remember that moment where I was walking for the first time after moving down here, walking from the Red Line to my work. And I was like, holy shit, I made it. I accomplished this dream.
That is amazing.
Yeah, it's so good to hear your wife got to experience the wedding she always wanted in Chicago too.
Hey, listen, you know what I mean? That's the gig. That's the deal. It was a great day. It's one of the best days of my life. I always say, like, there's 2 days where every single person you love is in the same room and you're not there for the second one. It's weddings and funerals,
That's
man, right?
jeez.
And
So
it's like
true.
everybody you love is in the same room, and the vibe is so high, and it's just, yeah. I think if you're with the right people and you're kind of doing this thing sort of on the right track, that's the feeling that should be there.
That's a good way to look at it. I've
Yeah,
actually not thought of it that way. That's good.
sure.
That's good.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad to have you on. When I learned of your story, I thought it was very compelling. So we'll talk about all that, but I wanted to start with, what did you want to be when you were growing up as a kid? And then how did that change over time? And I know that's pretty much your whole story, but let's start out when you were a little young whippersnapper.
Yeah, man. Listen, I wanted to be a hockey player from probably the time I was little until um, about high school. And then it was like clear that dream was not going to become a reality. And then I sort of shifted gears, and then I wanted to be a classical musician. I was a really pretty good string bass player. I play the upright bass. I still have it in my bedroom behind me. Um, and honest to God, that was the trajectory. I graduated high school. I started studying under this principal bass player for the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra because I'm from Minnesota, and I was trying out for orchestras. That's exactly what I thought I was going to do. And then one night, I walked into a radio studio and I watched Tony Fly work for 2 hours, and my life was forever changed.
Wow.
I know.
And you knew that was what you wanted to do, because you were a really successful morning show host for 20 something years, right?
Yeah, so
27 years?
that's before it, right? So that's what I'm telling you. That's what's leading up to this. So when I was growing up, I didn't always want to be on the radio, although there are some funny stories that my mom has about like me being downstairs and playing records and talking over them like the guys on the radio. She has those memories of me doing that kind of stuff. So I guess it was always innately there. But yeah, my life dramatically changed in 1995 when I saw that dude work, and I was like, and I literally set down the bass. I never picked it up again. I went to school. I learned how to be on the radio. And then I did the radio grind, which was so common for, my era of people. It was just moving city to city to city to city to city.
And then would it get bigger and bigger shows or bigger and bigger audiences?
That's
Yeah.
exactly right. You're locked in, man, right? Like it's all about the bigger city and drive time.
Yep.
So you can be on in the morning. And Chicago is a great example because that's still a city that I think uses their local radio stations. Not every town, not every city can say that. I don't think that's as true here in Phoenix. I think you'd find more people who would be like, when you ask them, do they listen to the radio? They would say, you mean podcasts, or you mean Spotify, or you know what I mean? Like that's what they think of when they think of the radio. So that's what I thought I was going to be, and that's what I ended up doing. I was a radio dude for 27 years, and then I capped that off too.
Wow. And I will say, like, even in Chicago, so I used to have a job in the suburbs, so I would drive to the suburbs.
Okay.
I would listen to the morning show. I would listen to the mix. And this wasn't that long ago. Now, we've had a ton of drama on our radio stations with the hosts over the years, but
Eric and Kathy had a little bit of a thing, and there was an Eric thing, and you're right. It was a big mess.
It was. So that's great. It's funny because, and I've told this before, but I'll tell you because I think you'd enjoy it. When I was young, I wanted to be a professional wrestler. I loved the Macho Man and the Ultimate Warrior.
How could you not?
I know. And I held on to that. And it changed. Like, I wanted to be a writer and a filmmaker after that. Yeah. But in high school, I was kind of like dabbling with it. And then my dad signed me up for a weekend wrestling training camp because he's like, if you don't try this, then, I don't want you to have regrets.
Yeah, but it's not the same wrestling. It's not the same wrestling.
No. And they beat the shit out of me that I was like, I don't want to do this. I'm like, I don't want to. And literally, like, you just kind of build up like 3 moves over the course of a day. And it ends with like you getting body slammed, which is like the most basic wrestling move ever. And they did that to me and my ankle snapped. And I was like, I'm done. Where's my dad?
there are plenty of one and done experiences for anybody who's truly getting after it, right? Like, that's acceptable. One and done is acceptable.
So true. So true.
I too was a huge wrestling fan growing up, right? And who was the ultimate wrestler?
Hulk Hogan,
right?
Yeah.
And I got to meet him like 15 years ago.
Oh wow!
Guy's arms are out of control.
It's like the size of your torso.
Bro, he's 24 inches around. That's like your thigh.
I follow him on Instagram.
Yeah.
He has cleaned up he doesn't really drink anymore, and he's been
Really?
back to training again. Dude looks like that again, and he's like 70. It's
Wow.
unbelievable.
Him and Arnold still tearing it
Right.
up, dude.
Right. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable after all these years. So tell me, what was it like being a radio show host, and where was your last show that you were at?
Amazing. It was the most incredible 27 years of my entire life. I mean, it was a dream job for forever. And, it was exciting. It was thrilling. It was unique every day. It was unbelievable to go to concerts and interview artists and have famous people in your studio, and to go out and and here's the best part about radio is like we would go out and certain people would know who you were, but because you weren't on the television, people didn't know what you look like. And so
Right.
what I still get to this day is like if I'm in the grocery store and I start talking to my kids or my wife, I'll see somebody do one of these things when they hear the voice.
Yeah.
So dude, it was the most unbelievable career, and I got to meet and do so many just insane things that this people from my neighborhood growing up don't ever get to do.
Where did you grow up?
Coon Rapids, Minnesota, and then Florissant, Missouri. I kind of split time between those two towns on the way up. But we spent most of our time in Coon Rapids, Minnesota, which back in the day was very blue collar. I'm penning a book right now, and I explain it like everybody there either worked at a factory or was a Vietnam vet. Like that was the vibe of that town I lived in.
There are so many towns like that across the Midwest that are just non-existent anymore.
Yeah.
And I grew up in the suburbs here in Chicago, Rolling Meadows, Schaumburg, Hanover Park, and we were working, working class too. My dad was from the time he got out of high school until they closed the factory down, built refrigerators. And my mom worked in retail. She was a butcher. She worked her way up to that, but she worked in grocery. And so we were like working class too. And all those jobs, like I remember we lost our house because my dad lost his job, and just the manufacturing was just it was just stripped out.
Yeah. And I love that you share that story so much, Nick, because in the line that I'm in right now, it's so important to share that, because when you grow up that way, there's all kinds of belief systems that are getting set up in you about who you are, what you're worth, what you're supposed to do, what you're not supposed to do, and if you're our age-ish, right, it was just a little different back then. There wasn't quite the care and concern for children that there is now. And so because of that, man, and like, listen, like losing your house, that's a crazy traumatic event. Even if your parents tried to make it fun for some reason to try to fool you guys, right? Like not having your home anymore is going to have a serious impact on how you approach your homes moving forward.
Oh, yeah. It's interesting because we ended up moving a lot. My parents divorced. So we were moving, for various reasons. I'm sure people can imagine. Sometimes those were not leaving of your own accord. And it did kind of embed this idea in me that like, oh, you really don't have a single place that's home. So to me, it's like, it actually wasn't probably until where I live now, this is my condo. This is the first place I've ever owned.
Yeah.
Probably wasn't until I lived here that I actually felt a sense of home that I remember outside of my grandparents' house, who, that house is still in the family.
Do you feel guilty about it sometimes? Or do you just like, are you so 180, like you dreamed of where you were going to be, you knew you made it, you're downtown, you're doing the hustle bustle? Or is it more like you sit there and go, like, I'm totally doing it?
I do that, but it's interesting because sometimes I'll meet people who have had a home that they grew up in, and their experience was obviously totally different, but their sense of home is very different than mine. So it's interesting to see the dynamics between people who grew up, living in a single house or two versus those who bopped around. And I think that's such an interesting thing to explore and examine with people in conversations.
It is important, and it's important to understand that there's history involved and how you got to
Mm-hmm.
where you are. And I speak so much now about. We can jump into the deep end, but these inner child wounds, which was
Mm-hmm.
so basically, let's say I have this 27-year career. Everything's fantastic. Everything's going great. I'm literally at the height of my career. I'm in the biggest contract I've ever signed. My wife and I've just bought a dream house in this beautiful neighborhood in Ahwatukee. Like we have this enormous backyard and these beautiful trees, and the house is huge, and we
Mm-hmm.
both drive nice cars, and like really on paper, everything was supposed to be perfect.
Yeah.
And what's unbelievable about this is that I find everybody I talk to that had kind of this awakening, like I did, call it what you want, midlife crisis awakening, you know, um, we all on paper looked just fine, and it looked like everything was smooth. But I can honestly tell you, man, when we lived in that house and we had all that stuff going on, it was literally the unhappiest I'd ever been in my life. I just couldn't figure out why, man. And so, like, long story short, I end up getting physical symptoms like shingles and panic attacks.
Oh my
And then
goodness.
I check myself into this retreat because my doctors are all telling me there's nothing wrong with me. Like I go, they're literally released
Isn't
me.
that crazy
Yeah,
that they can't diagnose those simple, panic disorders, all or anxiety disorders, all of
yeah.
that? It's so hard to diagnose.
And stress is what brings it on, man. And that's the thing, and that's what we have to start buying into more. Is like we want to relinquish control of our bodies and be like, I don't know, just let a pill fix it. And it's like, no, hold on. Find a way to manage your life
Right.
so that you don't have these panic attacks. Like, trust me,
Right.
I have had 3 panic attacks and shingles. I guarantee you they came from stress, and they
Uh-huh.
came from just not knowing how to and like, you think about all the things that are ingredients in stress, right? Like you said before we started recording, boundaries, not having
Mm-hmm.
a self-care plan, putting everybody else before you.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of the messaging, at least for me growing up, was like other people matter more than you, right? Like, you do the right thing for other
Right.
people. And I just feel like that whole generation left off this really important sentence, which was, yeah, but not at the expense of yourself. So
Right.
I had just burned out, as you mentioned up front, because I literally did not know how to take care of myself. I did not
Mm-hmm.
know how to manage these things. And I went to this retreat, bro, and they just unlocked so much shit about inner child wounds and that belief system that I was just talking about a few
Yeah.
minutes ago. And I was literally able to unravel everything. And I still fight it daily, right? That's still a grind.
It never goes away. Yeah.
But I was able to unlock every single thing about why I was making the choices that I was making, what I was doing, why I was doing it. And I had never been more clear in my life that I was going
Mm-hmm.
to walk away from my career and start using a very different sequence of words. Look at me, man. Like, look, Nick, I'm still behind the microphone, just like I was at my
Yeah.
radio station. But now I get to talk to really interesting people, and I get to talk about something that's really important.
Right. And that that's super relatable and very brave because, it took I I always say I meandered in my 20s. I was living for other people. I was living with diagnosed depression at that point. I was diagnosed early on and I just didn't know how to deal with it. So I would just withdraw and I would, spend time by myself and which I'm introverted too, so that was actually a way to recharge. But it's interesting because until you start the self-care, until you start realizing you can't give to anybody else until your cup is full, and what can you do to make sure your cup is full every single day or as close as it can be to full. And for me it was years and years of therapy and learning about boundaries and how to implement them when it's hard, because that's when they matter the most.
Right.
And how do you implement them with family? How do you implement them with friends? How do you move someone from a best friend tag to an acquaintance tag? And it just takes so much time and so much self-awareness to know what's actually draining you.
Yeah, well, and I love that you mentioned what I'm passionate about, which is environment, right? You just mentioned like
Mhm.
family and friends, and often that's where we struggle with the most boundaries. And so let me offer some folks grace. some people are just meant to be chapters in your book.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to think about your life that way, or think about it like a movie. Like, some people are just coming in to be a scene in the movie, and
Mm-hmm.
or maybe they're coming back to remind you of something. But not everybody needs to have the place you think they do. And we tend to give so much value to things that we don't need to actually give that much value to, and then
Very well said.
it gets blurry. It gets really confusing. And we see it a lot in our work environments, because yes, it is important for us all to be chummy and to get along. But then the lines get blurry about, well, oh, shit, how do I hold you accountable? How do I have a hard conversation with you when things aren't going good? Because I'm just trying to make the peace here. And we lose our way, man. And we lose all the stuff that it takes to get great. And greatness is like, it's there for everybody's taking, but we really have to step into it. And that's the thing that I had to unravel. I was like, man, you did it once, like, Nick, the deal for me was, I was 19 years old going to this radio school, and the teacher was like, what are you guys going to be in? Where are you going to be in 5 years? And everybody raised their hand. They were like, I'm going to be in so-and-so making $18,000 a year. And somebody said, I'm going to be so-and-so, I'm going to make 22. And I was like, I'm going to be in a top 10 market making 100 grand. And everybody laughed at me. And I was there by the time I was 24. So I did it once. I know I can step into greatness again. I just have to use the ingredients, which is a lot of things, right? And we can talk about that all day.
Well, and I think what's interesting about you, and you alluded to this earlier, like, hey, I'm back behind the microphone again, podcast consulting, teaching people podcasting. So you've managed to take what you enjoy, you've managed to take your career and your skill set, and you've managed to apply it to something that actually fills your cup and helps you make a difference in other people's lives.
What a great thing to notice, man. Absolutely. And I think everybody has that capacity. We just don't oftentimes step back and think about how skilled we are. One of the great things that I get to do is speak in prison systems now, and I go and talk to juvenile inmates, and it's literally become one of my absolute favorite things in my life. And I'm so thankful that I get to spend time with these guys and talk to them. But, they have a superpower they don't even recognize, because of their constant crisis of an upbringing. These kids are wired to read a room the moment they walk into it.
Yes.
These kids are wired to deal with so much adversity where other people would just crumble. They don't even know it. Like, they do. They have trauma. Isn't all bad, right? There is an opportunity, as my podcast, there is an opportunity to learn from it and then use those tools. But the problem is, most of us, myself for sure, is I just got stuck in the story about who I am, what I'm here, and what other things, what I got to be as a man, a husband, a professional. And I lost my way, dude. Like, when I speak, I say, I literally forgot to ask the question, what do you want?
And that is such a powerful question to ask. I went through that too, man. I went through that.
Tell me about your journey.
Yeah, so much on my career. And this is something I've really realized. I've been unemployed for 10 months. I've been doing some coaching, some consulting here and there, like keeping things afloat. But, when I lost my job, I kind of had this, and this is the third time I've been laid off in tech. So I'm a marketing executive in tech. I've been, a VP director for 5-6 years now. Okay. And I dedicated my whole career because I was going to get that city life, right? That I told you earlier.
Sure.
And the way to do that was I was going to be the CMO. And I remember I figured that out when I had my first job out of college at Motorola. And they would praise their they praised their CMO, Jeffrey Frost, I think. I'll correct that if I'm wrong. And he's the guy that came up with Hello Moto. Do you remember that? Hello Moto.
For sure.
Yeah. And I was like, I'm going to do that. That's going to be me. And I just grinded and grinded and grinded. I didn't take care of myself. I was exhausted mentally. I was exhausted physically. The only thing I cared about was work. I had some relationships and stuff that didn't work out a lot of looking back. I'm like, I just focused everything on work. I would work as much as it took for me to be successful.
But isn't some of that okay? I mean, that's what we have to say to people, right? Like, to a degree, if you're really going to get to the top, that comes with it. That comes with the territory. But like I said earlier, Yeah, but not at the expense of yourself. Like you don't have to
Exactly.
die doing it. You can delay it a little bit. Like I'll give you a quick story. I coach hockey and I got
Mm-hmm.
JV, middle team, top team all the time. Who do you think, which team do you think everybody wants to play for? They all want to be on the best team and they want to get there as soon as they possibly can. And don't get me wrong, I love that. But sometimes the best thing for us is to stay here in the middle for a season so we build
Mm-hmm.
up confidence to be here at a much different way rather than jumping into the deep end so quickly that you sometimes are treading water and now your experience surrounding it is very different.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what happened to me. I ended
Really?
up being, interim CMO at a company when my boss resigned to go be a CEO. The CEO asked me, he's like, I really want you to run this team. This team trusts you. And he encouraged me to go for the role and I was doing it. And I was like, I don't know if this is what I want. I don't think I'm ready. And maybe that's not why isn't what I want. And so I took a step back and I said, no, I will do the interim part, and help you find someone that I think will be successful.
Yeah.
But I wasn't ready. I didn't want it. And, it kind of made me think of all the sacrifices that I made along the way that maybe I shouldn't have made to get where I was going so quickly. How
Yeah.
many relationships didn't get the attention they deserved, how much sleep I lost. And, sleep is so
Right.
important to your
Right.
wellness. So I think that the grind happens to people and sometimes they don't even realize they're in the deep end.
That's why it's so critical to like take a step back. And
Yeah.
we don't check in with ourselves enough. And that's
No.
really the problem is that, we just need to allow for a little bit of checking in. Now,
No.
one of the things that I'm quick to talk about is like, listen, are you familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Yes, of
Okay,
course.
so it's like it's really important to note, like if you're still trying to get the absolute basics, like if you don't have a place to sleep, food, shelter, clothing, some of that stuff, right? Like, okay, you don't necessarily need to be quite as concerned with getting your shit together, mentally, spiritually. Like you have
Right.
other things that you're fighting for, but along the way, that needs to be a part of the plan. So, take you and take me for an example. As you're coming up, well, I think that's really good. You're supposed to come on up, man. In your 20s, that's what I would say to everybody. In your
Mm-hmm.
20s, go like hell. You got all
Mm-hmm.
the energy in the world. You're smart. As long as you're learning all the time, you're going to be in fantastic shape. And then you're
Yep.
going to get to a place where you can maybe now in your 30s, because this is typically the age where people bring families into the equation and some of that stuff, right? Or at least they get outside just their city life and going out to bars and clubs and that kind of thing that
Yep.
happens in your 20s. And now you might have set your table for a little bit of stability for the next decade. And you're going to
Yes.
want stability for the next decade because raising a family is really hard.
Mm-hmm.
It is. And it's very challenging. But if you have stability in your workplace because you grinded hard for, 6, 8 years or something like that, that's really worth it. And that would
That
be
was a
my
big
advice.
motivation for me.
Right?
I'm like, I don't want to be in the situation that my parents were in. And it's not even, I don't even think it's their fault. Like they did the best they could, but that stability makes all the difference in the world.
It allows you to calm down and it allows you to like I always tell people the best thing about making money was just the ability to take care of myself. Literally, was
Mm-hmm.
to be able to go to get a massage, go to a retreat, go and do this, that, and the other thing to just get away, go on vacation, see
Mm-hmm.
things. You know what I mean? Like that's when it boils down to it, that's really the exciting part about making a couple of bucks. But outside of that, man, it's yeah, we're going too hard. So I have a question for you. So when you're in that interim position there, what are your days like? I mean, are you having to fill two roles? So is the company essentially asking you to do double duty, or what did that look like?
So it was a wild time and I had it's so interesting because I went on Love is Blind and this was all happening at the same time. And like mentally away from work, I was the strongest I had ever been mentally.
Yes,
I had my
yes.
self care now. I rebuilt my self care routine during COVID after everything crumbled down. I and took some time, did a lot of therapy. There's always a lot of therapy involved.
Always.
And yeah. And then it was like, this was the one thing that was kind of like haunting me because I was managing 12 people at the time because I mean, you know, a manager leaves, other people leave. And so the people he was managing, one of them had to leave. And so I inherited that team. So I was managing 12 people. You know, I had some people step up and help, but they didn't want to be managers or they weren't
Right.
ready to be a leader. And you know, it was getting to me because I was in meetings all day. At this point, I'm, you know, in literally meetings all day with the C-suite or with the investors or with my
Right.
team in
Right.
one-on-ones. And I'm a very active leader. So I meet with my team members. I try to do it once a week if they want to, or once every other week. And, you know, it was weighing on me. It was a lot.
Of
And
course.
you know, I always like to roll my sleeves up, and this is something I need to get better at.
It's the
But I like,
Chicago in you, man. It's the
yeah,
Midwest in you.
I want to write the blog myself. I don't want the blog to be written by a
That's it.
ghostwriter, you
That's
know?
it.
So it's stuff like that. So it was a lot of pressure, and I hit my breaking point there, because I was reporting to the CEO, and he was in Denmark or Stockholm, over there. And he called me, he messaged me one time. It was like 9:30, 10 o'clock my time at night. And he messaged me and he's like, "Hey, I'm up and I'm thinking about what you said in the meeting today," which was, I'm like, "You guys, like, this is unsustainable. I can't manage 12 people and deliver, you know, the leads that you need and the pipeline that you need and all this stuff." And he called me and he's like, "I'm worried about you and I need you to, you know, go on this vacation and know that," which was Love is Blind for 3 weeks with no phone or anything like that. And so he was like, "I need you to go on this and I need you to take care of yourself because you're not going to be any use to you. You're not going to be any use to us. You're not going to be any use to anybody."
That's impressive.
If Yeah. And so because I was actually almost not going to go because I felt the stress of work. So it was a lot. But you know, when someone checks you like that and notices, you know, that's something. You should never be in that position. Like, I should have been taking better care of myself at that time from a professional standpoint.
Sure. And then you jumped into a damn circus, and so right, like that's what people don't understand about. And I maybe I saw a couple of clips of some of the stuff that you're passionate about, but yeah, I mean, it isn't a vacation.
No,
You know, people don't understand how much energy it takes to be on.
for 18,
And
20 hours a day.
absolutely. And you know, I
And
did it
making
for
life altering decisions every like
the
day.
biggest heart decisions. You're messing with people's minds. Like, you know, I've always struggled with reality TV just from that standpoint alone. I think we manipulate people, and you know, it doesn't bring out the best in all of us. Now, I know there's a lot of shows that are trying to do better, and good for them, but by and large, yeah, that model is just, it's not set up for scholars. It's set up for the Jerry Springers. You know, it's that attitude of like shock TV, always changing, very emotional, you know, sexy people, good looking folks, you know. And I don't know, it's not my favorite kind of TV to watch, but I actually do appreciate the concept behind Love is
I do
Blind,
too.
because of the deepness and the conversations that you get into. And so it's almost this neat little social experiment about what will happen. But I was thinking about it on my walk today, Nick, and I'm going, yeah, you can't do a relationship without physical. So there's not a species in the world that doesn't look at the person they're getting ready to mate with first. And so you just flip it. It's so strange.
Yeah, I think part of what's so interesting about that is you're spot on, but when you build that connection and you do it through a wall and you're kind of like eliminating all the outside distractions of work, friends, family, all of that stuff, you really do have the most authentic, genuine conversations. I mean, I had conversations with Danielle, who was my wife from the show and fiance. We had conversations that, like, I had never had that deep of conversations with anyone before.
Wow. So you really
And so that,
connected.
yeah. And I never watched reality TV much. So when they reached out to me on LinkedIn, which was where obviously my social media present was with, you know, pushing my leadership content and professional content, I was like, I don't think so. Like, that's not for me. And I watched the show and I was like, oh, there's some real genuine people and connections that seem to be built on this. Maybe this show is different. And it is. And I believe the concept can work. And the other thing that I'll touch on is part of the pressure cooker environment is, am I going to find someone? Are they going to pick me? Are we going to pick each other? Then are we going to get engaged? Then are we going to be attracted to each other when we see each other? So like these are all the different levels of life altering decisions that you're going through. Right. And then you spend the next 4 weeks deciding if your lives can integrate and if you want to get married. Yeah.
4 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. We were married in 7 weeks.
That's super realistic. That's almost everybody's story. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so I think conceptually, because I fell in love, but I feel like maybe things would have been different if we met in real life under normal circumstances, and the manipulation wasn't there, and really learning like what triggers Danielle and what trauma she's worked through in her past and using it against her in every interview. And you just don't. They already have the story they want to tell. They're not actually interested in following your story.
Right.
And so these things can be produced much more ethically. People don't have to record 18 to 20 hours a day. You don't have to deprive them of food and water. You don't have to give them unlimited alcohol. Like, put some regulation in place. This is like the Hunger Games out here.
I mean, I'm laughing because it's why I struggle with a lot of that stuff so much. Is just honestly, it's because it's just not a decent way to treat each other. And I just think of any spiritual leader that you want. I don't care if it's Jesus or Buddha or Muhammad or whatever that is for you, and just imagine them as the executive producer and go, would any of them be okay with an ounce of what's happening here?
That's exactly right.
I don't think so, right? And so for those that aren't spiritual, like whatever you believe to be good in the world, is that moving us closer to that or further away? And come on, it's that simple.
Right. And I want to ask people, I actually just thought of this. If your boss came up to you and said, you're going to work 18 to 20 hours today, and you're not going to get paid overtime, you're not going to get breaks, and you're also, by the way, not going to have access to food and water, how would you feel?
Yeah.
What would you say? Is that humane to you? Because that's what, and it's not just me. I've talked to at least 50 people over the last few months who have shared far worse stories of their experience, let's just say.
Yeah, I used to interview a lot of the Bachelor and Bachelorettes on the way up, man, because they would all come on the show, and I heard several stories just like it, where like the drinks are flowing and there's nothing to eat for hours. And it's like, well, what do you think you're going to get? You're going to get the kind of TV they want to produce.
That's exactly right. And it's funny you mentioned Jerry Springer, because that show rose to popularity and when it was produced during the writer's strike in the 80s. And that was that's kind of considered the first wave of reality TV. Cops.
Yeah.
Jerry
Cops.
Springer. Geraldo I forget what his show was called.
He was legit until the chairs started getting tossed.
Yes, I remember that because
I was watching that show live because I'm a little older than you, but I was watching that show live and I remember seeing it. And then I saw him on the streets in New York City one time, and I walked over to introduce myself, and he was very nice.
Yeah, I believe it. And I remember when that came on, because the commercials showing it, my mom and I would watch that show every day, and she wouldn't let me watch that episode because I was like 4 or 5 years old.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, there was a lot going on in that episode.
Yeah. So it's interesting. That was the OG reality TV boom. And then it happened again in 2008 when the writers went on strike again. And now here we are. So I saw yesterday, Love is Blind is casting in 4 cities. That's 4 seasons, 15 people on each side, 30 people each show. So what is that? 120 people are going to be going through this experience without regulation, without labor practices, without access to food and water. And by the way, it hasn't gotten better on any of the other seasons. I just talked to people a few months ago filming a new season. And these people are all going to come out without any support unless they have it in their I guess they have that support system or therapist or whatever it is.
Surprised the networks don't have some sort of universal regulations that would carry through. Like you would think, NBC has an HR policy for its employees, and you would think anybody that would be on an NBC lot would have to abide by certain, regulations.
You would think.
Yeah, but you're right. It isn't
considered
that
a contractor.
I guess you're right. I guess you're right. Yeah, and what's interesting is like, and I think you believe this to be true. There's certain people that they can go into that experience and they could genuinely have a great time. They could genuinely leave it feeling, pretty good about themselves. They've increased their following on social media. They've given themselves a new platform and I mean, you have a couple of these things too, right? You have this podcast so it's afforded you a couple of things to be able to do the thing. And so I know not everybody has a good or bad experience. I think there's a lot more gray area with inside of it. But listen, man, like I spent 27 years in the entertainment industry. Like I will attest to anybody that cares to listen that they absolutely, the people are just the means to get the thing done. And to a degree, like you have to be okay with that if you're going to be in that industry. You got to understand that
it's still
hard,
capitalism. It's still if there isn't. That's the thing with, we don't have to get into capitalism, but that's the thing with capitalism is if there isn't regulations, it becomes exploitative.
Yeah.
And my co-founder of the UCAN Foundation puts it well. He's like, they view us as human props. So picking up and moving a prop over here.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah. You're the means to get it done. But, it's the trade-off for some people, right? Like, and for 27 years, I was willing to trade it off. And I knew very, very well. And my story is like a lot of other guys. So I want the men especially to perk up. It's like, I always knew I wanted to be a different parent to my kids than what I experienced growing up. I always knew I wanted to provide a richer life, both in terms of money and just accessibility and opportunities to my kids than I had growing up. I had a lot of dreams about what my life was going to look like. And I got sucked into the other thing too much, right? And then what happened was one day I woke up and I had this crisis of like, my life isn't on track. You're not doing the thing that your little inner child, to go back to that phrase, that little boy that when you were 10 and 12 dreamed of. Get back to that. Go back and do that thing. And
like lost your purpose.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. And what's crazy about this story, the part that I love to tell about this story was when I announced that I was going to leave my radio show, the main motivating factor for me was just to be around my family more. Like when I tell you that I wasn't there one morning when my kids woke up for school or putting them to bed at night because I had to wake up at 3:15 in the morning. And so I would go to bed at like 8
always
o'clock.
Wondered what that was like for parents who were doing these morning shows.
Brutal. You don't see your kids. Like you see them after school and that's about it. Like you can do the after school and sort of evening-ish things, but then
when you're getting up at 3:15 in the morning, it's 9 o'clock at night, but for you, by the time they get out of school. Yeah.
It's so late, man. It's a really tough lifestyle, but and the point is, like, I had literally written myself out of my family's life. I did. I literally wrote myself out of the equation. And how do I know that? Because when I quit that job and I came back home, they had no idea what to do with me. I had no idea what to do with myself.
Oh my God.
I didn't even fit in my own home. And we've had lots of conversations over the course of the last 2 years in my family about that very thing. It's like, I wrote myself out of the equation, guys, and I'm really sorry about that, but I'm really trying hard to write myself back into the equation.
Right.
And so, little things like being around for breakfast, being around for lunch, when I'm home early. Yeah. It's like, I'm almost a little bit of a disruption in my own home, but that's on my own accord. And so I want men to pay attention to that feeling and don't write yourself out of your family's life. Like write yourself back into this thing. It's very possible to do that.
I have goosebumps. I don't even know what to say because I feel like when I reflect on what you just said, I think so many men do that and they don't pay attention, not just to their wellness or their mental health, but they don't pay attention to like, are they fulfilling the character they play in their family life? That's so sad.
Like you're not just going to work and bringing money home. That's not it.
No, that's losing track of what's important. How did you know it was time to walk away? What was going on with you?
Literally, it was the physical symptoms showing up. So when I got shingles, that really messed me up. Like, but not totally messed me up for 3 weeks. And I don't know if you ever had shingles, but they just,
I know what
these,
they are. My friend had it. Yeah.
okay. And so they just feel like you're being electrocuted. That's what every little red mark feels like. It's just an electric prod, just
And you can get it on different parts of your body, right?
torso or face. Yeah. Torso or face are the two most common places. I got them on my face, which meant it
At
was
least you were on
brutal.
radio. No, I'm just
Oh
kidding.
yeah, right. Well, I couldn't talk. That was the craziest
Oh
thing, was
my
I couldn't talk
gosh.
because every time I moved my face, it was like like it was literally. I would rather break my leg than have shingles again. It was that painful.
It lingers too, doesn't it?
3 weeks.
Oh,
3 weeks. And so
man.
what happens though is after 3 weeks of not talking, getting a lot of sleep, I felt better. And so I jumped right back into it, man. And within 3 weeks, I got my first panic attack, and then I got my second, and then I got the third one, which scared the shit out of me.
Did you know you were having panic attacks at the time, or did you think you were?
No, the first one I had, I only kind of came to the conclusion after. Then I
Okay.
knew about the second one, and when the third one hit, I thought I was having a heart attack. I was 100% convinced that I was having a heart attack, which is why we ended up in the emergency room. And that's what I mean, Nick. Like, and then when they came in and they were like, "Hey, you're fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with you," is in that moment where I said, "All right, dude, listen. If it's not physical, then it's mental or it's spiritual or it's both of those things. Go to work. Because I think we all, unless I'm really wrong about this, most of us are aware of our demons. Most of us are aware of the things that have kind of hit us along the way, that are part of our story about who we are, what we're worth, what we're willing to do, and all those things. And I knew that some of that stuff was holding me back. And I really in my heart knew I needed to do the hard work on it so that I could get to be the person that I really want to be, which is this man here, this wise man who's like, stop with all the bullshit and is literally trying to do everything that's important moving forward.
That's such a powerful thing to hear. I first of all, I commend you. I feel like you can know panic attacks exist. Yeah. You can know people that experience panic attacks. You can experience them with them, but until you have one, you have no idea what it's actually like. And I had my first one last fall.
What was going on? What was going on in your life?
So I had hit rock bottom. I had a very public divorce going on that was leaked in TMZ before I had told my family.
Was this with the girl from the show?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So you're everywhere.
Yeah, it was very public. And then of course, millions of people watch this show. It's the most watched reality show in history, more than The Bachelor and Bachelorette. And the whole world was sending opinions. My heart was literally broken. And people had all these opinions. People were spreading rumors. People were saying bad things in the media. No one had lived it, but she and I. And it was coming at me from everywhere. And then I lost my job shortly after. And that was right around Thanksgiving of last year. And so I was like, I'm falling apart. Like the world. And this is something I learned to stop thinking that the world was happening to me. And what I learned before all of this was that I need to show up as myself. I need to do the best I can and try to do the right thing. And if I do that and I stick to that core value system, I will always be okay. Well, I wasn't feeling okay anymore. And I felt like this whole year was supposed to be the best year of my life. I've got a beautiful new wife. I've got a wonderful new family that just took me in, and I took them in, and I felt, when we were in love. Like it wasn't not real. And I think people project when they look at something on TV and they don't think it's real. They think it's a show, even though they kind of think it's real. But it was a real divorce, and it was heartbreaking. And I felt like I was, going back into this avoidant space that I've always been in. I'm like, I can't deal with this. I just can't deal with it. And then losing my job, and then realizing like no one gave a shit. Like no one understood what this was like. No one from Netflix or Kinetic, which is the production company, ever reached out to check in, to do a mental health check. And I had just experienced two of the most traumatic experiences a human can go through. Yeah. And so I just remember I was walking And I was forcing myself outside, which was a very important thing for my self-care, is to get a morning walk in and get as many walks in as I can. But morning is essential. And I was scared to go out in public.
Yeah.
And I remember I forced myself to go for a walk in the afternoon, and I got a block down, and I just started feeling nauseous. I started feeling like, and I had already developed gagging. So I would start gagging when I would start thinking about the show, and I would start thinking about, the public, and start thinking about how, I lost my new family. I lost my wife. And
how long were you guys together total?
Almost a year and a half.
Oh, I mean, that's
Yeah.
a clip. That's a clip.
Yeah. And we struggled throughout, but it's the pressure cooker environment. It just continues, because even once you're married out of the show, you don't know when it's coming out. You don't get to see it before it comes out. So you're watching it with the rest of the world. And then you're seeing, in some cases, things that happened that didn't happen that way because of editing. And so, this is where I just started getting this feeling like the world's kind of happening to me. And I'm not an active participant in my life. Yeah. And when I started thinking about that, and I was walking, and I started gagging, and I started feeling nauseous. And then I just started shaking, and my heart was racing, and I felt like I was going to pass out. And I just sat down on a bed that was around a tree, and I just sat there, and I was tired for days after that. I honestly, I haven't felt the same since. I haven't had, I still have the gagging rears its ugly face. I haven't had a panic attack since then. And it took me, it wasn't until later to the day that I realized what happened. Even to this day, I developed the weirdest stuff. I would get nauseous and have to sit down and close my eyes for 5-10 minutes, where I felt like I was going to pass out. I actually did pass out one time a few months ago. And it was just I was outside, I was walking, something was going on, it got overwhelming, and I just fell down. And I thank God didn't hit my head or anything. But these things just kind of have manifested over this time. And I've been trying to take back my life. I've been trying to take back control. I've been trying to reset my mind to what it was before, that hey, how you show up in the world is on you. And that's part of the reason I renamed this podcast to Eyes Wide Open, because if you're going to go through life, you've got to go through with your eyes wide open. You've got to understand people. You've got to understand yourself. You've got to understand what's going on in any given situation that you go for, so that you can show up as your best self, and you can show up for other people. And that's kind of my mantra now. And I'm trying to be grateful for the things that I have. I still get, I don't know when helping people turned into a polarizing topic, but it's very polarizing to have this stance on, hey, we can do reality TV ethically, and people that don't want that.
Of course.
And then of course you have the media's, inflammatory and defaming, and they don't want to talk about the whole article that says, hey, I'm trying to organize these people. We need basic rights. We need mental health support for these cast members. We need labor practices. We need to be considered employees so that we get basic labor protection. They take, a headline where I said, we should consider residuals for reality stars because they've made billions off of Love is Blind, which I contributed to that, and an early season, which has promoted the show to make multiple other seasons. And I have trouble getting a job. And I'm a couple months away from losing my house because, I saved a lot of money. I saved 4 or 5 months and, went through that, and then unemployment ran out, and then I cashed out my 401k, and I was, hanging on and doing what I could consulting, but I'm a couple months away, and it's just one line in one interview that was 29 minutes of other stuff. That's the headline that gets on the story. That's what gets picked up in the media. And then I instantly become this privileged reality TV star who doesn't want to work and all of this stuff. It's there's no way I was where I progressed in my career if I didn't want to work.
Yeah.
So it's just, so then it's,
it's exhausting, man.
It's exhausting.
It's exhausting because the world does not need to be left and right. It just needs, more people are in the middle. More people hang out in the middle. And you're not saying all reality TV is bad and we should get away with everything. No. You're saying let's just do this a slightly different way so we don't treat people like dogs. Can we just agree that that's okay, right? It's the same thing on almost every political argument that's out there. And it's exhausting to me, because I think that's the thing we have to get away from. It's like, I'm not saying I want to move all the chips over here. I'm saying, can we just move them into the center? And you know, I don't know what that is, man. But let me tell you something. I keep marching. Number one.
Mm-hmm.
Let go of control. Number two, you will never be able to control what people say about you, how they post, what they use, how they twist it. So in a sense, you can relinquish that. You can say,
Yeah.
it's not for me to decide how they react. That is up to them. I'm just going to keep doing this, you know. And I coach athletes, and one of the things I say all the time is like, just run your race. Like, just play your game. Don't worry about what this other guy is doing or what she's doing. Don't worry about any of that stuff. Just run your race. And in the end, you will win. It is so simple.
It's so simple.
It's really one of the easiest things. And then the final thing I'll leave you with, and the audience too, is like, there's this concept of the transitional character, and this changed my life, Nick. So I was in my retreat, third day, and my healer looked at me and he said, I think you're a transitional character in your lineage. And I had no idea what that meant.
Oh.
Right. It hit me that way too. I was like, okay, that sounds like a lot of truth, but let's put some color around that. And he's like, listen, some people come to this world and it feels a little crazy. It feels a little dysfunctional. Maybe their environment isn't exactly something that makes sense to them. And they know that there's more out there. They can just kind of feel it from the time they're a kid. They can just feel like there's more out there. And so he says that the transitional character's job is to move the lineage in that direction, is to literally take all those generational cycles, all that generational dysfunction, all the things that you know are going to move everybody to a better place, and just be bold and confident and just trust that you're the character here sent to transition your lineage. You're the one who's going to shift this thing. You're not going to win it, but you're responsible for shifting it. And so I think that's a superpower. And if that resonated with somebody who just heard it, consider the fact that you might be the transitional character. Consider the fact that you're the one who is here to make the shift. And now you can step into that, which feels pretty good. And it's a lot less about purpose. Yeah, it is. And you don't have to give a shit about what people think or what they say or what they do. Like, fuck, it's just noise. Turn the volume down.
That used to be my superpower.
Yeah. But I mean, you're probably one of those guys who's sent here to shift things. And so, you know, remember that on the dark days, dude. We need you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. What was it that got you out of that place? What was your self-care routine? How did you discover what that was? And do you still experience anxiety, panic attacks in that same form, or have you managed to learn how to better, I don't know if control is the right word, better
manage it?
Yeah, manage it. That's the word.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so part one was the idea that I matter. I love to hear that you want to have a little fun. You want to play, have a little exercise. So what I love to, when I go out and I speak, I say, everybody in your head right now, I want you to think about the 5 most important people in your life. So, you know, these can be people you live with. They can be people that are in your family, work with, like whatever. So start to visualize in your head right now, who are the 5 most important people in your life? Okay. And so you come up with maybe your top 3 or something like that. And then the question that I challenged them with was, did your name make the list? And
for not
almost everybody, the answer is no. And for almost everybody, the answer is, in addition to that, I didn't even know I could be on the list. So until we make that shift, until we see ourselves as one of the most important people in the world, self-care is out the window. You will never take care of yourself. You don't matter. You don't value yourself. And I had to learn that I was devaluing myself because of some old belief systems, back to those inner child wounds. And when I stepped into a place of, bro, you matter. You matter a lot because you're the transitional character that's here to shift your family. You're really important. So if you don't take care of yourself, we're fucked. Got it? So now it's so easy for me to step into self-care. I don't feel bad about it at all, man. It's like, I need a day, babe. I'm going to go to the lake, babe. I'm going to go get a massage. I'm just not going to work for an entire day. I'm going to sit on my couch. And now I get it. Not everybody has the luxury to just kind of do that, especially if you have a traditional job. But there are things you can do.
Yes.
There are things you can put into your life. You just absolutely have to know, number one, that you're important. And then number two, putting yourself first isn't selfish. It's the only way we ever get the best version of you. Bottom line.
That's so true. I always tell people if I'm coaching them or if I have Instagram content, if you are not putting yourself first, it's very likely nobody is putting you first. And that is
So true,
I think
man.
that's something you've got to remember. And you're not doing anything wrong if you're taking time to do something for yourself.
Right.
There's an element of guilt I think people feel. And I know I felt it before.
Sure, me
and
too.
Tomorrow I told myself, I'm like, you're not doing anything. Like you're not working on your podcast. You're not doing anything for the foundation because it's exhausting and I'm tired and I'm burnt out. So I think people need to give themselves that grace, but it's just so hard.
And if you don't think you matter, bro, you won't touch it. Like that's the thing. You won't even come close to it. So you're speaking to an addict who's going to go drink the next day. Like until the addict makes up their mind that they're going to switch, nothing matters.
Right. It's beautifully well said. Well, I think your story is very powerful. I talked more in this than I think I usually do because I just felt like the parallels and the connection.
Good. I love it, man. Yeah.
Learning from you. But before we go, is there anything you want to ask me additionally that we haven't already touched on? Because I felt like you asked a few on the way.
Yeah, I actually I'm on the fence between two questions. Okay, so and I have these are both interesting. Okay, I'll do both. Okay, so here's the first question. The first question is I'm a music guy. And so when it comes to music, I always love to talk about like, what are your favorite acts? What's maybe some of the best concert that you ever went to? What's the album that you choose for comfort? I love having these kinds of discussions. So like, what's the album that you seek for comfort?
It depends on what I'm feeling in the moment. I'm embarrassed. I love Taylor Swift.
Why? Of course. I love Taylor Swift.
Yeah. One of the reasons that I love Taylor Swift, and I used to get in an argument with one of my good friends about this because he would say she has no talent. But he was talking from like a musical perspective in 2008. It was like Teardrops on My Guitar era. And I would argue, I'd be like, but dude, she's telling stories. Yeah, she's not just, it's not about her voice. She's telling stories. And if you watch her and you follow her, like every era, which she finally branded is a different version of Taylor that's grown from the last version of Taylor.
Amen.
And I believe, sure, I'm sure some of it's her excellent genius in marketing, but, I really believe she shares a lot of what her experiences are through her music and her ability to tell stories through songs and albums. And to me, like, I'm a storyteller first. And when I have another storyteller, like you, for example, I just get so enthralled in it because, it's a way to escape. That being said, probably my favorite concert I've been to. So I don't like inside concerts very much, but I love
outdoor ones. Yeah.
Yeah, I love outdoor ones. I've seen the Foo Fighters. I love the Foo Fighters. They're probably one of my favorites. Seeing Florence and the Machine was
they're so
really
rad.
Yeah, that one sticks out too. And then my first ever concert was Coldplay. And not first ever, but my first concert that I went to is
where do you go from Coldplay?
You don't go to indoor concerts anymore. It's just, it is what it is.
Hey, you're screwed, man. You're screwed after Coldplay.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So that's the music question. So thank you very much for that. And by the way, I was lucky enough to meet Taylor Swift and spend a little time with her a few years ago. And her mom took me on a tour around her set. And then she brought me back to meet Taylor, and it was like as cool as you'd want it to be. She is absolutely the person I think that you just depicted. Okay. My second question is, I am also a hockey coach, and I have been for 17 years, a la growing up in Minnesota. And I have a situation. Okay. So this is a, what would you do? This is a, what would you do? All right.
Oh, I love this.
All right. So in hockey, there are lines of people, right? You have your three forwards and your two defensemen, and that makes up one line. Okay. So we have one line on one of our teams, and it's filled with three potential superstars. And they literally are probably the best kids on that team when they perform. So one of the kids is really not, he just doesn't care. The lack of effort, it's starting to become a thing on the team. And so somebody said today, why don't you demote him to the third line and see if that gets his attention? What would you do?
That's a great question. I have one question to ask.
Yeah.
Is he still good, and he's so good that he doesn't feel like he needs to put the effort in anymore?
That's 100% it.
Ooh. Oh, man.
Yeah, he throws flames like, I'm the best one on the team.
Honestly, when I think of team, and even as a leader, I like to elevate others.
Yeah.
So I think you got to bump him.
Yeah.
Or I don't think you need to do it permanently, but I think you need to. It's like, I tell my dog, I'm like, when there's a puppy playing with you, you got to check that puppy. That puppy is going to eat you and chew on you if you don't. And so I think you gotta show him, hey, just like this, it can end if you don't appreciate it and you don't put in the work.
Yeah, I think what I'm going to end up doing is having a conversation with him first and letting him know what's on the horizon and giving him an opportunity to step into change. And then if he doesn't do it, then the consequences there, and he writes his own fate, right? Like, I think there's so much power in putting I put the power in his hands.
That's actually better than just going hot or cold, I think.
Right?
Give him an opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why you're a great coach. That's why you're a great coach.
I just think about a lot of things, man. I had a shitty coach growing up who made me, step away from a sport I loved. And I always told myself, like, I'm going to always be the coach that I needed when I was in 9th grade. Like, I'm going to forever be that guy for these people, man. So
first of all, that's lastly on that, that's awesome. And that's obviously a trait of yours, because you said you were going to be a better parent than your parents were for you. So, you're always looking to be a better version of what you've experienced.
Why am I doing it, Nick? It's exhausting.
I bet. So, well, thank you so much for coming on today. I enjoyed this so much.
Too.
Where can people find you on social media, website?
Yeah, perfect. So I'm on the gram, as a lot of people are, at Matthew Blades Media. You can follow there for, I'm like, I wouldn't say I'm a good mix of, like, you get to know me and then you also get a lens into the stuff that I'm doing. And then my website is called Learn From People Who Lived It. And that's also the name of my podcast and my speaking series, where we go out and we literally share stories just like you do, right? We share stories of people and what their journeys have been. But our podcast is really geared towards the tools and strategies they use to get out of their own ways and step into a life they want. And then I've also got the I Needed That podcast with Chris Powell, which is taking off and doing some exciting things too. And he's a great human. We love doing the show together.
That's awesome. And we will put all those links in the description.
I
definitely encourage you to, at the very least, give Matthew a follow. It's good stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on today. I genuinely appreciate such a open conversation.
Oh yeah, man. No sweat. It's like I say, like, this is what I get to do every day now, is just use the right words. And it's so refreshing.
It's so refreshing. Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Eyes Wide Open. If you enjoy the show, the best way to support us is by sharing or dropping a review. For more information and content, check out engagewithnick.com or find me on Instagram at nthompson513. Don't go through life blind. Do the work so you can show up in the world with your eyes wide open.